Anyone who's willing to dedicate their life to caring about people who are hurting so much deserves a few pleasures in life of their own. Considering Erin Brockovich could barely afford to feed her kids a meal at one point, never mind herself, you have to know she's planning to indulge a little when she finally comes into some money, as she does at the end of the movie. Although a spark plug coffee, you're actually making an affordable choice. A convenient one, too, because they deliver promptly to the doors of Canadians and Americans, and Canadians can 86 any thoughts of having to pay for the shipping. 86 those thoughts! And what'll be in that package? Why, premium quality coffee, the kind of beans that'll be the basis for the best coffee you've ever made. Takeout? Bah! Make it at home, save money, and enjoy your drink more, and say bah. You're going to be brewing with the best, but you'll want to keep on doing that, so join the Autopilot Coffee Club. If you feel the need to pause your membership for a spell or to cancel altogether, you can do that hassle-free. So hit up sparkplug.coffee/HYES and give this wonderful hot beverage a try, or even cold beverage. You like cold brew, right?
Yeah.
Our HYES promo code will win you a one-time 20% discount. Right off the bat, you're saving money when you load up on the plug. The plug. And then when your boss gives you a nice big bonus check, you can buy more coffee. $1 million worth. Or maybe it's $2 million. $2 million. Well,
$2 million in like early 90s money, too.
Is that $75 million now?
Yeah, basically.
Well, I've made all kinds of references to our movie of the day. Let's stop hinting and start actually discussing it. Bev, tell the stick man that he's up.
And action! Have you ever seen
Erin Brockovich? Happy day, movie monkeys, and thank you for popping your pod into your earbuds. Not your pod, our pod. This is episode number 673 of Have You Ever Seen? The husband and wife podcast team that review and spoil classic films every Monday. I'm the middle-aged, paunchy, and sometimes crabby non-lawyer, Ryan Ellis, and here's my vivacious but also hexavalent wife, who's an empath and doesn't mind dropping some four-letter words from time to time. Does she actually swear? Bev is your name. Does she really swear in this movie, though, in the sense of the F's and the S's?
Good question.
I don't think she does.
They keep it PG-13, don't they?
I believe it's true. But they say she's crass and speaks four-letter words. I just covered Born Yesterday last week, and they don't swear in 1950, but obviously that guy would have, that kind of dude, that crass guy, and probably his lady, the Born Yesterday lady, Judy Holliday, would have too.
Her crassness is just that she's argumentative and she pushes back and she's
and
stubborn.
Direct.
It's like attitude. Direct, yeah.
Direct.
She's blunt and not very ladylike, I suppose.
And hexavalent.
Hexavalent, yeah.
All right, the coming attractions trivia for this week's movie, Erin Brockovich. The real Erin's third husband has a link to Coal Miner's Daughter, a movie that got recently posted on this channel, and also to Us, You and I. What are those two links?
Well, the link to You and I is easy because he is yet another Ellis. We are everywhere. For the record, we're both Ellises, and it's not even my married name, it's my maiden name. We actually met because our last names are the same. No, we're not related.
Moving on, Eric Ellis is his name. A
yes.
country musician, apparently, is what he is. So she's listed on IMDb now as Erin Brockovich Ellis.
But they're divorced now.
Okay, but she still is listed that way.
It's true, yeah.
IMDb.
But I couldn't figure out the Coal Miner's Daughter connection.
Musician, country musician.
I read that he was a choreographer.
Well, that's what I saw when I went on Wikipedia, that he's a country musician. So The Job and Coal Miner's Daughter and our last name. Okay, The Brock was released by Universal Pictures 25 years ago on St. Patty's Day, 2000. It opened number 1 and stayed there for 2 more weeks. That's probably the power of Julia Roberts. Soderbergh wasn't really a big name quite. Yeah, maybe so. It was Julia Roberts, let's face it. It was her. And it wasn't unusual for her at the time to be number 1. And this film did pretty well domestically, but went on to be a phenomenon worldwide, making 5 times its budget globally. But Bev, the movie is a quarter of a century old now, so don't make me beg. And help us to remember what the plot is about by giving us a skinny on Erin Brockovich. And please, don't make me beg.
Julie Roberts is Erin Brockovich, a struggling single mom who bullies her way into a job at a law firm only to become completely obsessed with a case about the nearby factory town of Hinckley, where groundwater contamination from Pacific Gas and Electric was making the residents very sick. With passion and empathy, Erin works with the victims and her boss, Albert Finney's Ed Masry, to bring a huge, historic class action lawsuit against the company. She gets pushback from the corporate lawyers, the skeptical townspeople, and her boyfriend, but her hard work pays off and she wins a massive settlement for the victims. Oh, I should mention, it's a true story.
Or in a nutshell, woman who essentially hired herself makes her law firm millions of dollars. Because she basically makes him hire her, although I do love that moment when she's very meek and says, don't make me beg for a job, but she walks in and says, you need me, And if you won't work with me when I'm your client, then I'll be one of your employees. And he still fires her at one point because he thinks that she's loafing. Instead, she's working very hard, and that's why he's not seeing her.
She's just not communicating what she's doing. The more I think about that scene, the more I'm like, you deserve to get fired. You disappeared for a week. You
and don't communicate
vaguely say, I'm going to do some more research, and then you don't come into the office for a week solid.
Or even call, probably.
Or even call, let them know what's going on.
Did ask for it a little bit, but she was certainly the best employee he had by the looks of it. Okay, there's a lot of numbers for this movie. Let's go through them. Rotten Tomatoes critics like the movie. 85% say it's good. 130 fresh, 23 rotten. And the audiences are at 81%. Those are the third best reviews for Julia Roberts, by the way. And guess what one spot ahead of it is? You're not going to guess. I have to just give it to you.
Okay.
It was my trivia question it was part of, I think, Born Yesterday. One of my recent episodes, though. I think it was that one. Maybe it was Coal Miner's Daughter. It was about Julia Roberts, the parents in Wonder. She and Owen Wilson are that kid's parents. Well, that's one spot more, one tick more.
Really?
Yeah, 86% for that. And then some other movie, I didn't remember what it was. But not Pretty Woman and not her other big hits. This is third. This is way down the line, though, for Steven Soderbergh as a director because so many of his movies are 97, 93, 92, whatever. 85 is good, but he's got a lot of movies that are way higher. This was 13th at the 2000 U.S. box office. Castaway was number 2. Gladiator was number 4. Best Picture winner, opponent of this at the show, as were Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that was 12th. And Traffic, which I thought was going to win, was 15th. We've covered all 4 of those and many others from that year. But the last 3, Gladiator, Crouching Tiger, and Traffic, were all competitors for Best Picture. It was a good group there. Shokala shouldn't have been there.
Nope.
Maybe Castaway should have been. We love Castaway. Julia won Best Actress, her only time ever winning. She's been nominated other times, including for Pretty Woman, where she's fantastic. This was also nominated for Best Picture, Soderbergh for Best Director, Albert Finney for Best Supporting Actor, and Susanna Grant for Best Original Screenplay.
I love the detail that Steven Soderbergh lost Best Director to
himself.
Steven Soderbergh for Traffic. He won for Traffic that year.
He's one of 3 guys that were up for the Best Director Oscar in the same year. One of them is a pretty well-known name. The other one I covered in a movie a couple months ago. So Clarence Brown, who directed National Velvet, that wasn't one of the ones I'm talking about, but that's what I recently covered. It was 2 movies he did in, I think, maybe 1930 or something like that. And then Michael Curtiz was the other one. I think 38.
And did either of them win?
No, they didn't win anything.
So Soderbergh has that distinction.
Being the only one that's won, but up against himself, yeah. But as for that year's nominations, where was the one for costume design? It was vital. Justice for Jeffrey Kurland, because her look is vital. Yes, it's modern. It's not Gladiator, Crouching Tiger, period movies, fantasy in the case of Crouching Tiger, but the costumes are so vital to this woman's success. Apparently, the real Erin didn't use her body as much as Julia does in the movie, but I'm sure she used it in some ways. She is a former beauty queen.
I commend the wardrobe for resisting the urge to put her in expensive clothes. Like, this is a nice touch. Nobody ever wins costume design for a contemporary movie.
That's
it's
what
like
I'm saying.
Incredibly rare, yeah.
This is the time they should have.
You can communicate so much with clothes, including class distinctions. She's very working class. So her wardrobe looks kind of cheap. It doesn't necessarily fit all that well. It does annoy me that a woman who's so broke she goes hungry so her kids can eat, and yet she never wears the same thing twice. That's kind of silly, you know? Like, except for a couple pieces of jewelry, she never repeats even a skirt.
We like that Go Well Hunting because he wears that ratty t-shirt many times, because he would.
Yeah, I feel like that's something actually costume designers are finally doing, having people repeat outfits. But although a movie that does it very well is Cabaret. She has basically 3 outfits she wears for the whole movie. Anyways, I think Soderbergh could have resisted the urge to constantly remind us that Erin likes to dress provocatively. It seems like the camera was always finding the best angle to show off her legs in those skirts and to let those bra straps pop.
And, of course, the cleavage.
And, of course, the cleavage.
Which
but
Julia
I guess
doesn't have
she was
very
like,
big boobs, but still.
She's at her peak power. She's the star. This is part of the appeal of the movie, and it works. Not even just her outfits, but I think there's a really nice touch. Ed, his look is just as impeccable for its perfect illustration of business casual in the 90s, right? Like,
but not wealthy.
Not wealthy. He wears these shirts with these really specific stripe on the collar, and there's this subtle detail that I love, that in the scene where he drags all the support staff into the meeting with the corporate team to intimidate them, and you see that the young man in the meeting has the same stripe on his collar, and you realize it's because he's wearing Ed's shirt. And they never say it out loud. They never show him get changed. That's wardrobe. These are the little details that you can tell a story with. There's so much artistry to this. So yes, I agree. Wardrobe, I don't know if I would have given it the prize, but definitely deserves a nod.
It's a nomination.
And contemporary movies, and especially movies about any kind of poverty, they always prefer movies about rich people wearing great clothes. Feels like that's easy compared to doing something like this.
Yeah. Vital. Should have been up for the award. Kurland. Julia's speech, by the way, I did watch it last night. I've seen it several times. She kissed Danny DeVito, who's sitting behind her because he was one of the producers on this. The only nomination he's ever had was as producing for this movie. And, of course, they didn't win. Then she paid tribute to her fellow nominees, some great actresses. Joan Allen, Juliette Binoche, who was in Chocolat. Joan Allen was in The Contender. That was a good performance, very good. Ellen Burstyn, I thought she'd have won for Requiem for a Dream.
I was looking at the list, and I'm like, who should have won, though? Ellen Burstyn's the only one.
It's a little hysterical, but I do like the performance. Laura Linney, though.
It's not a leading part.
She should have been supporting, it's true. And then Laura Linney for You Can Count on Me. Binoche is fine. I just don't like Chocolat very much.
To me, the only performance...
It's not delightful.
To me, the only performance that was a real competition for her would have been Laura Linney. But that was like an indie film.
No, it was Burstyn, I think.
I'm saying me personally.
Oh.
I like Burstyn's performance, but I agree with you. It's pretty over the top.
But Julia won every award.
And it's a supporting performance.
Yeah,
and Julia Roberts, to say, oh, she's due. How often do you see an Oscar go to a performer for the exact role they should have gotten the Oscar for? Of course, Julia Roberts should have a Best Actress Oscar. And of course, if you're going to pick any movie, it's going to be for this one. Maybe Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman for me.
Yeah, okay.
We had to pause the recording there, so hopefully we'll be where we were. We have two foster dogs who wandered upstairs. They've never come up here before, but Maddie and Sadie have joined us if you hear that. Anything in the background. I think one of them's licking herself right now. We were talking about the Oscars. Kathy Bates won the year that Julia Roberts was up for Pretty Woman. So I can't argue that.
Oh,
you get a horror performance that so rarely gets recognized, but Julia was great 10 years before this, and she's good in this. And I'm not against it. In fact, just like last week I said in Born Yesterday, I'm less against Judy Holliday winning out over Gloria Swanson and Bette Davis in Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve after seeing that movie again. Same with this. I'm less against it than I used to be. She also mentioned in her speech Richard LaGravenese when she mentioned Susanna Grant, who wrote the screenplay, and he's not recognized on this that I've seen at all, so he must have had an uncredited role, and usually IMDb acknowledges if somebody's uncredited, but I didn't see him listed there. She thanks Soderbergh, of course, and he was big that night because he won for Best Director, Traffic won 4 of its 5, in fact, and then this one won, so 5 awards, and Maddie's shaking. This is where Juliet called the composer, I think it was Bill Conti, the Rocky guy, Stickman. Put that stick away, I'm going to be up here for a while. And then she said, I love it up here. So it's a little bit obnoxious, but she looked beautiful, and it is one of the more memorable ones of all time. And the very next year, Halle Berry won for Monsters Ball, so it was an epic couple years in a row there.
It's always fun when a bona fide movie star wins an Oscar, right?
Especially when they give a memorable speech.
Yeah.
This is 73rd, or was 73rd, on AFI's Top 100 Cheers, Most Inspiring. And a movie I covered 10 days ago, Coal Miner's Daughter, which was part of our trivia, was 70th on that list, so in the same almost spot, 70th, 73rd. Erin was 31st on AFI's Top 50 Heroes. She's the 5th highest entry for a woman on the heroes side of that list. What is it? Ellen Ripley's higher, so is Clarice Starling. But then, this is a real person. One of the few real people, at least of the women, I think at all, on the hero side or even the villain side. This was also nominated for the Top 100 Genres, courtroom category. There aren't a lot of courtrooms in this, but still. The Top 100 quotes with, "They're called boobs, Ed," which is a good line, but not one of the greatest lines of all time. And the 2007 AFI Top 100, so the greatest movies of all time, could have made the second list. All right, we talked for a long time there. We had an interruption with the dogs. I don't know how deep we are into the podcast, probably 15 or so minutes in, but go ahead with your not even initial thoughts anymore, but go ahead. You already talked about the costumes and stuff. Erin Brockovich.
It's a great movie. It's a great screenplay. Julie Roberts is perfectly cast, and this is possibly her best performance, I keep saying. It's incredibly watchable. It's quite cathartic and satisfying. Makes you mad, but gives you that happy ending so you don't leave furious. I think it suffers from some facile and, dare I say, lazy conflict in the form of every interaction with Erin turning into a dressing down of some kind. It's a shameless crowd pleaser in a way that makes my eyes roll sometimes, but I've seen it more than a few times now, and it never fails to win me over, so this crowd does remain pleased.
I think you wanted to cover this for the month of Bev, so it was one of your top 10 or so choices, and I thought, let's cover it later in the summer. I don't know why, it just made more sense to me.
I see through some of the techniques more now than I did when it came out. I really loved it and watched it many times over. Now watching it and having a keener understanding of screenwriting and storytelling, they really are just turning the knobs here and not being all that subtle about it. I like it a little less.
I don't think you like A Civil Action as much as I do. Very similar topic. So does Dark Waters. That was a few years ago. Todd Haynes directed that. And Ruffalo, I believe, is the star of that one. Civil Action is John Travolta, and a lot of terrific actors, actually, but he's the star of that. I prefer that one out of all of these poison water type movies.
All these poison water movies.
Well, they're all about that, all three of them. Yeah. And there's probably a lot more I'm not thinking of right now. But I think A Civil Action is a better film. It was a couple years before, and I think when this was getting so many raves, and it was such a hit, and then it got all the nominations, and she was winning. I don't know if I said this earlier during the award section, but every award. I think she was the first actor to ever win the BAFTA, and the SAG, and the Globe, and this, and maybe something else. But she was winning every award, and I was tired of her. I didn't like her romantic comedies. I didn't like Notting Hill the previous year or Runaway Bride, even though everyone else did. So I was sick of her. I didn't even see it in the theater. I saw it on tape probably, or even maybe DVD. But Civil Action had been 2 years earlier, and I thought that was a very underrated, excellent film. So that bothered me as well. But now that I'm past all that stuff 25 years later, I like this more. I still like A Civil Action more than that. But yes, it's her performance, although Aaron Eckhart was becoming a player at this point too. I think he does a very good job in this movie. He's not a big actor necessarily, other than when he's playing Harvey Dent, I guess, in Two-Face and Dark Knight. But he does a good job here too, and he's the one who's really basically in love with her, and she's not. She might like him a lot, maybe would be in love with him, but she's too busy. The real love story, though, is Aaron and Ed.
Yeah, the screenwriter even said the courtroom stuff is so boring because it's a class action suit. There's just
civil action?
A civil, yeah. It just wasn't very interesting, so she said the movie had to really be a love story between Ed and Erin, and about how she comes to trust him and he comes to gain faith in his profession again. And
trust her as well, because he doesn't early on.
She really has to win him over.
He does say at the end, this case needs you, after they've had another one of their fights. Forgive my stomach if you're hearing it, by the way. We had a pretty big meal. I think my stomach is saying, all right, I'm going to get through this eventually. You ate too much food, dummy, and the dogs are calmed down now, but my body is rebelling. But he does say this case needs you towards the end of the film. You said early 90s. It is set in 1993, and we see her out job hunting when she gets into a car accident. The way they did that was the real Julia got into a car and drove off, and somewhere in there's some kind of CGI thing. I didn't notice it at all.
Seamless.
Did some car go by? If a vehicle went by or she went past a post, that's what it was. I should have looked for that. I forgot that was about to happen, so I wasn't looking for it. But some kind of CGI effect. Then they've got this radio-controlled car that this stunt driver just smashes into as hard as possible. And that's a doctor. She sues him, but she loses the case because she won't stop talking, and she's brash and abrasive, which is her whole character, and Ed's her lawyer. But then he ghosts her, I guess because she won't stop bothering him. Now my computer's making noise. We can't win. Our neighbors are moving. They might be noisy for this over. We can't blame them. They're moving in 3 days. But they might make noise before we're done here. Anyway, so all that set up, all the stuff is against her, and if it weren't for the fact it's a real story, it'd say, and maybe some of it's made up anyway, but it does sound like it's a little bit fabricated that all these things are happening to her at the same time. But I guess when things are down, things are really down for someone in this type of, well, especially in a movie.
Erin Brockovich herself said that the movie's 98% true. Even when you talk about the changes, they were pretty much cosmetic. A scene that may have taken place in a courtroom takes place in a boardroom instead. So I believe it. I love that scene. It's right at the beginning of the movie. And it gives you so much immediate faith in the filmmakers because it has this cute setup. She's applying for a job. Doesn't go well. She knows she's not going to get it. She leaves. She's exasperated. She breaks a nail. She gets a parking ticket. Oh man, this girl's day can't get any worse. And the music is cheerful. It really lulls you into this sense of safety.
And what can happen to Julia Roberts, of all people?
Right. Probably an open, not unlike a lot of her rom-coms. Introducing the same character that she's played over and over again. And then there's no warning, there's no musical hit, nothing. That car comes out of nowhere. It catches you so by surprise. So it's a great bit of filmmaking in the sense that it's these dogs.
That's me again. That's my
that's you. That's your stomach. I thought it was the dog whinging. It's a great misdirect to surprise you and a great introduction to the movie you're about to watch. Yeah, we're going to charm you. You're going to find this movie relatable and fun and watchable. But this is dead serious.
And she's beautiful, too. Doesn't hurt. This is one of the best looking roles she's ever had.
Oh, heard her full power. This was just the best she's ever been as an actor. Maybe the best she's ever looked. Well, maybe Pretty Woman's the best she's ever looked. But
And then she finds out not too long after the sitter is moving. So that's where George comes in. Not that that's what he's for. But he's outside revving his bike. And he hits on her right away. But she goes through the numbers.
Yeah.
How many numbers you got. I think he means phone numbers. And then my daughter's 10, that's one number. 6 is how old her other daughter is. 8's the age of her son. 2 is how many times I've been married and divorced. 16 is the number of dollars I have in my bank account. And she does her phone number, and guessing 0's the number of times you're going to call it. So that's one of the better scenes in the whole movie. That actually maybe should be in the quotes list as much as they're called boobs, Ed.
Too long for the quotes list.
Yeah, I guess that's true, yeah. But that is a great scene, and it's also her being a bit dickish, but because she's mad at him for revving his bike fairly late at night when she's got 3 young kids, especially the baby trying to sleep.
And I think it's a good introduction of her character to say, okay, she may dress like this, she may look like this, but she certainly can't get won over by flirting. She doesn't actually care about men. She dresses like this because, as she says later, I think I look nice. This is just who she is. But we never see her really being flirtatious in any meaningful way, even with George. Traffic did this so well, too. It's so good at giving you a ton... It's so good at giving you a ton of information in a charming, fun way. The way that this movie handles exposition, and it has a real challenge.
I swear I'm not
farting. No, it's just his stomach, folks.
The chicken's going down slow.
In that scene, she with charm and humor, tells us so much about herself. We learn the age of her kids. She's been married and divorced twice.
Good exposition as well, you're right.
A great exposition. All the times that they need to tell us about the case, and it's through these heartfelt conversations with the plaintiffs, or it's through her getting clarification with Ed. They wrap it up in a scene that's really about some other emotional beat that we're way more interested in. But it's incredible how easy it is to follow what's happening in this movie, considering how much information they have to dump on us.
Yeah, Civil Action gets into that. I'm sure Dark Waters did too, where there's things you don't understand, but they've got to make it so you do. And I think this movie does a pretty good job of clearing that up for you. Things like hexavalent, what does that mean? But I want to stay with the George thing for a minute, because he's such a big part of the story for about half of it, maybe at the most. He's not in the movie a lot in the second half because he does leave. He's tired of waiting on her. And then she hires him to be her babysitter, which I think is based on reality as well. An ex-boyfriend, I don't know if it was George, maybe a composite character, but an ex-boyfriend was hired to babysit the kids because I guess he did before that. He's such a natural with them. She's a good mom, but he's a great babysitter and great Uncle George, or whatever they even call him.
Such a reversal of how most movies like this go, where it's a husband. It's usually the man. Yeah. That's the hero in a movie like this.
Come home to your family. I can't. Yeah. I got more important things going on at work.
We've seen it a million times. I call it the reactress. I didn't come up with that, but I love that word, the reactress. An actress whose only role is to basically complain about everything because
now it's a
our
reactor.
Stoic hero can't express emotions because that would be unmanly. So you have to have a wife at home going, that's dangerous, and freaking out. You're never home, all those things. So he's that character, and it feels so different. And you sympathize with him more, I think, than you do in the typical wife character. Partially because these aren't his kids, too. If he was the dad, it would certainly read far, far differently, but he's not even these kids' dad. And he's a very nice guy, despite him being a biker. Despite my assumptions about what a Harley-Davidson biker would be like.
With long hair.
Yeah, with long hair and the big handlebar mustache and the tattoos and everything.
None of that was that common back in 2000. Now it is.
But it's funny, they both are people who dress a certain way, very explicitly telling the world something about themselves where but their actions, their behavior seem to be completely against the type that they're trying to give off to the world.
Yeah.
But he's such a lovely, warm character. This is more, I guess, prop than wardrobe, but I love the detail when they're having the fight near the end of the film, and he's like...
Maddie agrees with you, by the way.
Maddie, the dog, is...
just panting away.
This
whole thing is a mess. We should probably start it over.
She's insisting on sitting in my lap, even though it's cooking in here, and she's making me break a sweat.
And she's panting hard.
So...
Go ahead.
So... There's a scene where they're breaking up, basically, and he says, I bought you these earrings, and I was waiting for a nice night to give them to you, and that was 6 months ago. And he shows her the earrings, and I think I said to you when we were watching the movie, those earrings don't look like anything she would wear. She always wears big hoops, colorful, and the earrings are teardrop pearls. She never wears pearls. She never wears dangly earrings like that. It's an interesting touch, too, to maybe imply to the audience, maybe they don't belong together.
He doesn't get her.
He isn't actually the perfect match for her. Well, the perfect match for her would let her be ambitious and support her.
Well, especially when she's doing such important things. Usually in the movies where the guy is doing the job and the wife's at home and she's the reactress you just talked about. Generally speaking, I guess, in movies they've had important jobs, but this is very important. People are dying, too. Whatever the line is in Star Wars. They're dying, too. Curse my metal body, I wasn't fast enough. No, but people are dying from this hexavalent chromium stuff, and the company covered it up. The only person that's really doing anything about it for the longest time, months and months apparently, maybe even a few years. Ed eventually gets in on it, obviously, but it's her. She's the only person that's helping them at all. The Jensens and the Robinsons and all these other people in town in Hinckley don't know to blame PG&E because they were told, well, it's not that. And they listen to...
They're not doctors. They're not chemists.
And they trusted the company.
Yeah.
Which I think is also what happens in a Civil Action. In that movie, there's that great line by, I think, Kathleen Quinlan. All I wanted was an apology for what they did to my son. But if they do that, then they're on the hook.
They're liable.
And they still end up paying a lot of money anyway in that movie. Also based on reality, I think. But in this one, they end up paying $333 million. Now, I don't know if that's what they actually paid. That probably came down on appeal, but that's what is said before the movie's over. $5 million was going to go to the Jensens because Dawn is going to die of... What is it, leukemia she's got? But she's going to die for sure.
Uterine cancer, wasn't it?
She's alive when the movie's over, but she doesn't have too much longer to live, I don't think. And Erin gets that $2 million bonus. So it obviously worked out great for everybody, no matter how much they actually got. It was a lot of money. But at one point, it was going to be that they'd have to just settle through arbitration for a lot less. But it's partly because Erin just won't stop. You need signatures, you need whatever number it was. If you need 5,000, I'll get you 6,000. I won't stop. I'll work day and night to do this.
Now, she could have worked as hard as she wanted. I think it's pretty strongly implied that no matter what she did, that case would never have gotten there were it not for the whistleblower, the guy
Tracy Walter.
Yeah,
Charles Embry.
They imply through a lot of the movie that he's a creep and that he's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, you cast Tracy Walter, you make it seem like he's going to be that.
Well, he is being a weirdo creep. And every time he approaches her, he just has this weird...
Hi.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a cheat. It increases the drama to imply something more dramatic is going to happen. And then you're like, okay, well, that was just a big red herring fake out. And actually, he's going to be their savior because he literally saved documents that he was asked to destroy.
I wasn't a very good employee. Mm-hmm. There's a 1966 memo, that's the smoking gun, where they acknowledged they knew full well what they were doing was hurting people.
And testament to, again, the quality of the exposition in this movie. The memo that connects the factory to the corporate headquarters, implying that the order came down from PG&E corporate because that's the only way they can get those big coffers. That's where the real money is. If you're just suing this one small factory, then that is a much smaller pool of money to pull from.
Is that what they were doing originally? Are you saying that? You mean that's what it would be if you settled for that?
Well, PG&E, there's the company, there's the factory in that town that's poisoning the water. If they can't prove that the headquarters, PG&E, the larger company, which is worth so much money, ordered them, was like responsible for this, then the company at large isn't responsible for
There's only
damage.
so much money you can sue from a smaller company. Okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it's like a satellite, and if you can't connect the small factory with the larger company, then you just go, well, one guy did this thing. The thing that always drives me crazy about these cases is somebody made this decision, and that person should be criminally culpable. Why is this a civil case? The CEO, even the manager, somebody at some point said, let's not line the pools properly so that we can save money. That person made a decision. Until you start holding individuals criminally culpable for actions that cause so much suffering, children.
There's that great scene where she's sitting with Donna Jensen, the Marg Helgenberger character. Whatever Erin says about the hexavalent chromium makes Donna run outside and get out of that pool, kids.
Oh, man.
Because, of course, that's
a great moment.
You forget about that sometimes. You think, well, I'm not going to drink the water then anymore. But you still use water. Look at the whole Flint thing a couple of years ago. They weren't able to use water for anything unless they boiled it.
But you still have to shower.
Could you even with
cook
boiling
with it, clean things.
But they didn't. They had water trucked in.
I don't think you can boil it because it was
so
lead,
it's useless to
lead
you
in
then.
the water. Yeah.
Unless you want to wash your car.
Yeah, I don't know how they lived. And I'm sure that they all just got lead poisoning. Somebody should go to jail. And yet, guess what? Nobody
And they
did.
were literally lied to as well because of that 66 memo. So nearly 30 years earlier, they knew full well what they were doing.
But you brought up Marg Helgenberger. She is so wonderful in this movie. She represents all the victims in a way. She's the one that we get to know the most. And she's just so lovely and warm. And of course, you're going to be heartbroken when you hear what happened to her. She cares about her kids. She trusts the company. I think it's a great touch, too, that these people are just like, but they told us it was fine. And why shouldn't we trust the company? We work for them. They're our coworkers. They care about us. They wouldn't poison us. That's part of the horror of it all, but it doesn't allow the audience to ever say, well, why did they live next to this poisonous factory? You have to be reminded the crime goes deeper than that. They were truly deceived, and aren't we all more compelled to trust?
Well, we also didn't know what chemicals and radiation, those kinds of things could do to us. I would say even into the early 90s. And you could say, why not? Well, because we didn't know everything.
The Love Canal thing happened long before that. It's not like this was the first big case like that that would have made the public distrust.
But it wasn't the most common knowledge thing that chemicals could be so bad for you. We learned from things like John Oliver's show about how bad this product is or how bad that product is. We used to watch Vice, same thing, that show, the Shane Smith show. We'd learn some things, and it was a depressing thing every time because it was never good news. We didn't realize just how much of what we're surrounded by. I'm drinking out of a plastic bottle right now. And people say they're so bad. I reuse these things all the time because I'm infested with plastic anyway. My stomach is still not settling now.
It's all the microplastic.
I reuse my Evian bottle all the time, and I don't know what's a little bit of plastic doing to me. I'm a pretty healthy guy, I think.
You talk about like civil action, dark waters, and so many movies that cover this kind of thing. Erin Brockovich manages to end on a really positive, optimistic note.
Because she gets a lot of money, for one thing.
We all got rich. They have the scene where she's giving Marg Helgenberger the check, and there's this implication, we won! Like, all her problems are solved. Of course, we know
she's still going to die.
That check isn't going to save her life. It will help with medical bills, but she's very sick, and chances are her life is significantly shortened, and probably her whole family's lives. But they made the choice to end it on a happy note and to leave the audience feeling better. And the great optimism of the very last shot we see is her moving on to the next case, knocking on doors and going to take down the next big
Because every day is a
corporate.
winding road.
Yeah, and then the Sheryl Crow song.
Which is also in another Travolta movie, 2 years before A Civil Action, Phenomenon.
Yeah.
I like that song, but I don't know if I really love it in this movie at the end.
I don't love that song.
It's a little too on the nose.
He's a very skilled filmmaker, and he makes a very good popcorn movie, but is through and through a popcorn movie, no matter how important the subject matter is.
I watched the last scene on YouTube before we even started watching the movie, maybe a week before we watched it, because I was curious about it before we even got to see the film.
The one where she gets the check from
Yeah, he
Ed,
walks
right?
in and he says, "We talked about your bonus, and this number's not what you expected. I gave what I thought was appropriate." She thinks it's a lot less, and she's angry, as she should be. Instead, he gives her $2 million rather than, I think it was going to be a couple $100,000, or maybe even not even that much.
It's a life-changing amount of money now.
And at the end, and we get the payoff to when she said earlier in the movie about how, as a lawyer, whatever it was, she said, "You suck at it." At the end, he says, "Apologies, Erin, you suck at it."
And the way he says it, too. He's so great. Oh, my God, Albert Finney. He is wonderful in this movie.
He'd been around forever and been in so many movies. He was nominated for 5 Oscars. I think this was the last time ever. Maybe the only supporting nomination ever for him as well, but it's definitely one of his better roles. We covered him in Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, the Sidney Lumet movie with Hoffman and Hawke and everybody. And he's a dad, and they're all terrific, but he's really good in that too. And then he's got a bit part in Traffic. So that's it for us so far, 3 times ever, and only in the last couple of years. But it's maybe one of the better roles he ever had. I don't know his work that well. I don't think I saw all of his earlier films, but still.
He has a great arc in the beginning of the movie. He's been worn down by all of the failures, all the loopholes, all the ways that the law profession will wear you down. And she comes and she reignites him with hope. And then by the end, he's a person who loves what he does again and believes in his work again. And of course, the relationship between the two of them is so great. She has a great arc.
But so does he.
Although, I don't know, her arc isn't as well illustrated as his, I think. Her arc is that she goes from a woman who's struggling, who's poor. You know, she gains confidence, but I can't say that I feel in her performance that she goes from a woman who's
She was already so confident.
hopeless and down on herself. She's already so confident. She starts off confident. The way she behaves, she walks in, she demands a job. This woman believes in herself. She goes ahead and just takes this initiative to do the research on the case and just dive in. And yeah, she starts off with confidence and believing in herself and okay with asking people to look after her kids and do what she's got to do. But his arc is the more heartwarming one to me.
And it's a fine performance. Del Toro won for Traffic that same year as supporting actor, so he beat out Finney.
And by the way, Julia Roberts, she became the first woman to be paid $20 million for a film for this. She was their first choice by all accounts. They really, really wanted her, just weren't sure if they were going to get her, but she read the script and immediately wanted
And then
in.
worked with Soderbergh many times in a row. I think they were making Full Frontal at that time.
Yes.
And then she was
all
in
the Ocean
Ocean's
things,
11
yeah.
was before that. Pretty how that worked out with the scheduling, but she was in Ocean's 11, pretty major supporting role in that. She's in the sequel, Ocean's 12, not in the third one. And did she work with Soderbergh again? I don't know, maybe not. If she did, it might have been a small role. But he does recast his stars and his friends many, many times over. He's very loyal that way.
He's a prolific filmmaker, and a lot of his movies end up flying under the radar. I haven't seen everything he's done. Have you?
Maybe not everything, but most everything.
Yeah.
He's one of those filmmakers I made a point, like Altman, of seeing somebody who has so many things in their resume, Woody Allen as well. And I tried to see all of them back before I even met you, and I think I did with all these people. But Soderbergh works so much that I don't think I've seen everything he's made the last couple of years. We saw that movie Presence. It was fine. It was solid. Wasn't
I didn't really
great.
like it.
Okay. It's adequate at least. I don't like his more recent stuff. That is true. We've covered him, I think it's 6 times now. 5. My computer is so loud. This is just a blank show today, recording this episode. Guess we're not going to swear. But we've covered his work with Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Out of Sight, one of his best films for sure, Traffic, and Contagion, which we covered right in the early days of the pandemic. I don't think he's ever been nominated for directing other than those 2 times. I didn't look it up. He was nominated for writing Sex, Lies, but that might be it for him. But he's also been producing ever since this year, when he made these 2 blockbusters, these Oscar winners, all the cachet he had, they're well-liked films, respected, all those things. Then he said to a lot of the people he knew, his friends, I'll produce your movie or executive produce your movie, and let's get this done while I've got this power right now in Hollywood. So he's helping out people like Todd Haynes with Far From Heaven. He's a producer on that one. And many other movies. I forget all that he produced in the early to mid-2000s. And he produced Pleasantville. We've covered that too, by the way. Didn't direct it, but he produced it. That was the same year as Out of Sight. But around that same time frame, the late 90s, he was saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm so bored of the over-the-shoulder shot. He's just tired of all of that. And I don't know what changed. Maybe because Out of Sight was an invigorating project for him. But I've never heard him. Well, you know, he talked about retiring about 10 years ago, didn't he? Just like Hopkins said that. Penn said that. Day-Lewis did retire, but he's going to work again for his son in some movie they've made or will make. But he did say he was going to quit after, I think, Behind the Candelabra, and he's made probably 10 things since then, if not more.
He probably decided to make this movie because he relates to Erin Brockovich so much that he's like, I never go home. I hate my family.
He's been married at least twice.
Yeah.
One of them
I imagine he's probably a pretty hard guy to be married to. This
Jules
guy's busy.
Asner.
So he was hired to direct this because he had a reputation for being a good director of women. It is a strength of his work that his female characters are really fully developed and treated with respect. And I can see a producer watching Out of Sight in 98, seeing how that story treats Jennifer Lopez, who's a total babe, but she's just incredible. Yeah, she's hot. She's gorgeous. I don't know if she's ever looked better. But it's like not even the third most important thing about her character. So I can see how they would see that and feel like this story is really safe in his hands. And it was.
Sex Lives is a good example of that, too.
Oh, absolutely. Eddie McDowell. How easy would it be to turn those two sisters into a joke? To make them caricatures, these southern women,
Or the three-dimensional.
backstabbing, sleeping with each other's husband. They're very three-dimensional. They're very interesting, and they're just such beautifully complete characters. What a great movie. It's crazy this man's made so many movies, and his first movie might be his best one.
We had this conversation before. I think I said I liked, maybe the conversation was, what's the best Damon and Soderbergh collaboration? Because there are a lot of those. Even more, I think, than Soderbergh and Clooney. And I think I said The Informant because it's so funny and so clever. But if you're talking about all of his movies that he's ever made, that's a tough one. I don't know if I can just pick one. I'll have to think about it, I guess.
He's had such an interesting career, too, because he makes different kinds of movies. He likes it. I guess he gets bored easily. Obviously, he really likes to challenge himself. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not. He has plenty of failures to go along with his successes. And I agree with you that it's not doing it for me so much anymore. I mean, we haven't seen Black Bag yet. Maybe that's great, but...
That's the other one. Yeah, there's Presence and Black Bag, and the span of about 2 months came out. We still haven't seen Black Bag, but we will. By the way, I see in my notes here, getting back to some of the good lines that are even better than They're Called Boobs, Ed, which is a fine quote, but this should have been a quotes nominee, I think. I hate lawyers. I just work for them.
Yeah, that's a good one. It was in the trailer. That got butts and seats, I'm sure. So perfectly personifies her attitude, too.
And using her boobs is when she goes to the files office, whatever it's called.
Yes, the water department, and there's that dopey guy.
His name again, is it Scott? It's a long, big cast list here. Where is he? It is Scott. Jamie Harold plays him. Oh, by the way, I scroll past, I see Cherry Jones, who is really good in that same year. No, 2 years later, in Signs. She's the cop. She worked with Shyamalan a few times at that time frame. I was surprised to see her resume didn't have that much good stuff beyond a few Shyamalan movies that I liked. And a few other things, too, because I've liked her a lot in some of those movies. She was in Ocean's 12 for Soderbergh as well. She's Pamela Duncan. She's the hard case.
The skeptic, yeah.
Who I guess eventually signs on, but she's the hard ass who does not want to go along with it because she just doesn't believe in this, I guess. I don't think she's siding with the company. She doesn't believe in Erin and Ed, for that matter. And they sure do take it, well, Ed does anyway, when they have that big town meeting and they get yelled down to some degree. But he does say, I'm taking a chance, too. I guess what he means is his reputation as a lawyer could be destroyed if they just get laughed out of court or something.
Well, he's invested a ton of money.
And his money, of course.
Yeah, he had to mortgage his house. If the case doesn't go through, he could be bankrupt. He really took a chance here.
And, of course, Erin's missing Beth's first words. She finds it out when she comes home and talks to George. Oh, and at one point she looks like she's sick. I think she says to Ed, I'm sick, and he makes her stay home or something. I read that she actually got sick from...
She spent, like, weeks in the hospital.
...investigating the hexavalent chromium stuff in that water.
Like, actually made her sick.
But Soderbergh didn't want to tip the scales or whatever you call it.
He was afraid that everybody would start thinking, oh, this is a movie about a woman who gets sick and dies. And he wanted to keep focus on the lawsuit.
Or she's even just affected by the thing she's investigating. Seems a little too pat and neat.
Yeah, yeah.
Although it makes sense when she's digging in the mud and the dirt where this stuff is.
So much of the story is, how could this be a true story? It's just too perfectly Hollywood. And I love how the story of how it got developed is the executive producer, Carla Santos Schamberg. She met Erin Brockovich at the chiropractor. They shared the same chiropractor, and she heard her story, recognized it for what it was, and got Jersey Films to buy the rights. Yeah. By all accounts, Erin herself was really cooperative. She helped the screenwriter. The screenwriter followed her around, got to know her for like a year, and she helped her go through the notes of the transcripts and the case files and everything. Of course, she has a very small part in the movie. Famously, she's the waitress who serves in the diner.
Which, with the name tag of Julia.
I love that. It's such a cool touch.
Julia plays Erin. Erin plays Julia.
It's cute.
And she's on the case for a couple years, but her kids, especially the baby, never age.
Yep. Those child actors. Don't overthink it.
You can't, because that kid should be at least a 2-year-old, if not a 3-year-old, before the movie's over. In the end, they get 634 plaintiffs. That is one big class action lawsuit. Right, so the cast, Julia Roberts, we've covered 3 times now. I bet you won't remember the third one. Pretty Woman, we know about that. I'll tell you, it's a small cameo, and she plays herself in it. A movie about movies.
The Player.
Oh, you
Player.
remember? Yeah, she's in The Player with Bruce Willis at the end, being saved from the gas chamber. And even though we haven't covered this, don't sleep on a fairly recent, not so recent now, I guess, maybe it was 2018 or so, Ben is Back, where she plays the mother of a drug addict. What's his name? Hedges? Lucas Hedges, I think is his name.
Great
She
movie.
is terrific in that.
She's so good.
And so real and serious. And I liked her in Charlie Wilson's War with Hanks as well. They should do more together. They haven't done that much. They've done a few things, I think. They were a good team there. Finney, I didn't mention, by the way, he was in around the same time, well, I guess it was a couple years later, a Bourne film and a Bond film. The Bond film, I think, was Skyfall. I forget exactly when, but Bourne and Bond.
It was Skyfall.
Aaron Eckhart was in The Dark Knight as Harvey Dent. Also, Any Given Sunday, which Chris and I covered on our old sports movie podcast, Scoring at the Movies, so only 2 times for Aaron. And it's hard to find his work so much anymore because his career flatlined after Rabbit Hole, where apparently do you ever hear the story?
No.
So he and Nicole Kidman played grieving parents, and he went into some real-life parents group that were grieving about some dead kids, and he pretended he had the same thing to learn something, like actors do. He was doing research. And I don't know why that seems to be, but it does seem to be the reason why his career just hasn't been all that big for about 10 years.
He got blacklisted for that?
I don't know if it's blacklisted. I don't know if I even believe it, but I've heard that. And you look at his resume, and almost nothing stands out from a guy who's this good-looking, and this good as an actor. He's done very little good stuff for at least 10 years.
I really expected him to be a movie star when he came out in The Company of Men, and then after The Dark Knight, I was like, okay, now finally, Aaron Eckhart is going to be a movie star. And he had some leading roles, but just nothing took off. But he just seems to be the whole package. Maybe there's something we just don't know about. There's got to be more to the story.
Well, women slip through the cracks, and we always wonder, is it because they got Harveyed, or is it because they dare to be a woman, or they turn 35 or 40? And all those things have happened. But sometimes it's a bad agent. Sometimes you don't want to do this anymore. You want to, but he's working.
Some actors just don't really want to be stars, right?
And it also could be that this sounded like a great project on paper, and so did this one, and so did this one, and so did this one, and none of them were. The other side of that is you have a year where you make 3 classics, and who knew? That could have been 3 duds for all I knew.
Nobody sets out to make a bad movie,
of course,
right?
Yeah. Marg Helgenberger is best known, of course, for playing whatever the character's name is on CSI. I never saw the show, but I've seen the ads, or used to see the ads a lot of the time, and she's not my type. Really skinny, a little skeletal, in fact, and a redhead with freckles, but I love looking at her in those ads. She was so hot, stomping around in those stilettos she would wear as well.
As most cops do. CSI. Forensics.
But it shows she's actually talented, though, as an actress, because she's nothing like that in this. She doesn't even really look like Marg Helgenberger. I don't know if I'd know it was her if I didn't know going in that it was her. She was also in Species and Bad Boys a few years before this, but her film resume is not that extensive, and she's only made 5 movies since this, 2000. In 2000, I mean to say.
Well, she doesn't have to work ever again.
Because of CSI.
Because CSI, I'm sure, made her a very rich woman.
And she maybe prefers TV anyway. Maybe she likes to schedule more, although that kind of show, I'm sure, is demanding more than most shows are. Peter Coyote comes in the movie as Kurt. What is his last name? I don't know. I didn't write it down. He's the lawyer that Ed brings in, the woman that Aaron insults as well. But anyway, so he was in E.T., of course. He's Keyes in E.T., and he worked with people like Pollock and Levinson and De Palma. But another guy beyond E.T. and this that doesn't really have a resume. You say, oh, there's that thing. That was great. And that was great. It's more 2, 3, maybe 4 things, and then worked a lot, but nothing really stood out all that much. Tracy Walter, though, who does play Embry, very key character, but he's not in the movie that much. This is our 7th time covering him. He was in Repo Man, Batman, City Slickers, The Silence of the Lambs, Philadelphia, and he has a small uncredited role in Independence Day. Also, Adela Barnes, what's her name? She's right at the beginning of the movie here. One of the many women in the office that don't like Aaron. Anna? That's her name, right? She was in Basic Instinct, but more TV than movies. Oh, and the kids, by the way, I'll mention them. Scotty Leavenworth plays Matthew. He was in Donnie Darko. I think he's the kid at the end when Donnie saved the day, and you see Jenna Malone comes by and doesn't know any of these people because we've gone back in time.
Donnie, yeah.
And the kid she's talking to on the bike, I think it's him. I believe it's the same kid. I could be wrong. I think it's him. And then Katie and Beth as well. I don't think they made anything else, those two. Well, the baby, and then Katie is the little kid. But also real people like Aaron. Ed as well as in this briefly. And the judge plays himself. Yeah. So what he did in reality, he did in the movie. We talked about Soderbergh's 4 movies we've covered. Sex, Lies, Out of Sight, Traffic, Contagion. Susanna Grant, you would think her resume would be more impressive, but she worked on Pocahontas 5 years before this, and then 28 Days, not 28 days later, but 28 Days, the Sandra Bullock alcoholic movie, same year as this. And those are the only ones I wrote down. Nothing else really stands out, except she was the showrunner for that series Unbelievable, the one where Caitlin Dever gets raped.
Oh, God,
is she believable?
Great show. What a great
series,
show.
Yeah. So she was involved. She made that. I guess she was in charge. And then it's DeVito, Michael Schamberg, and Stacy Shear, that production company, Jersey Films. They produced this. I'm not sure about the other two, but Danny's never been nominated for anything else. Certainly never acting anyway. I think at some point he would have been. He never has been. But they made Reality Bites or produced it, and also Out of Sight for Soderbergh, so they knew him already. We've covered those, and they were executive producers on Pulp Fiction, which of course we've covered. Movies 185 to 1, we saw it on Stars, although I believe we have the DVD in the basement that you own, but the movie looked okay. Ed Lockman shot it. He's been nominated 4 times, often working with Todd Haynes, including Far From Heaven, which was a nomination, I think. We covered that. We covered Carol, he did with Todd Haynes. And he also shot The Virgin Suicides, which will be on this podcasting channel 1 week from today. The editor, Anne V. Coates, a legend. She cut Lawrence of Arabia, won an Oscar for that. Then they gave her an honorary award many years later. And she also cut Out of Sight for Soderbergh. Yeah. And probably would have kept working with him, but he started cutting and shooting his own movies after. This was the last one that he didn't shoot, and I think the last one he didn't cut.
He shot Traffic, I remember that. Mm-hmm. And he was an editor before he was a director. That was how he kind of got into the business. We were talking about the cinematographer. Soderbergh, at this point, was already responsible for heavily influencing the style of especially indie films in the late 90s, early aughts. And I don't miss the shaky cam that they used pretty heavily in this movie. That was just ubiquitous at the time. But I'm sure that filmmakers who want a natural look I wish they would take their cue from films like this that managed to make the lighting look natural while still lighting it so that we can see everything.
Yeah.
Letting it have color. You're not going to ruin the integrity of your film if you add a flex fill or something. Just let us see what's going on. It looks really natural.
Well, Lockman's one of the greats. The composer, Thomas Newman, has been nominated 15 times for Oscars, but has never won. 15 nominations. He did music for Revenge of the Nerds, The Player, Shawshank Redemption, Little Women, American Beauty, and Finding Nemo. And we've covered all of those, and I think at least several of those were Oscar-nominated scores. Think about those scores, though, too. In Shawshank, you probably don't know that score so well, but American Beauty, that ding-diddle-ding-ding-diddle-ding.
Love that score. One of my favorites, really.
Finding Nemo's a great score. They're all good scores, and Revenge of the Nerds even. What happens next? Well, the multi-millionaire Erin keeps on being an activist. She really did do. She's still doing it now. It seems that some rich people can care about the health and well-being of others. You can be rich and still care. As for a fun thing about what happens next, which is usually what this is all about, what happens next in a fun way? Well, Ed makes Erin a partner, but then he gets an ulcer and then suffers a stroke while dealing with her rabble-rousing and her pain-in-the-assery. So I guess she takes over the law firm. Even though she's not a lawyer, she just works for them. Before we wrap up, one more thing I want to bring up is not quite the same thing when it comes to these kinds of movies, Dark Waters, Civil Action, Erin Brockovich, Hot Coffee. The documentary, yes. We saw that documentary at the film festival, the Hot Docs Film Festival many years ago, and I've seen it since. And it's about the whole thing where the woman was burned by McDonald's coffee because it was too hot. It's really
about civil courts.
And then it became about tort reform that Bush was on about back then. Well, before we saw that movie he was, when he was still in office. And for those who don't know, tort reform is just about how you can't really sue for these kinds of things. I guess this case wouldn't have happened in this movie, and a civil action wouldn't have happened. In Hot Coffee, she had third-degree burns. They show her skin. And when the director came out at the festival and said, before the movie started and you thought about the McDonald's thing, you all thought it was ridiculous and it should have been laughed at a court, right? Put up your hands. Most of us did, if not all of us did. What do you think now? I don't think any of us did.
The details of the case are astounding. It's just a great documentary and totally entertaining. It'll keep you really wrapped up. And it's really eye-opening. The part that I always remember is that it wasn't just about how civil courts function and how important they are, but it was really about how there's a propaganda movement of trying to convince Americans and everybody that they have a problem with frivolous lawsuits, that the civil courts are a scourge on our justice system, when as a matter of fact, they're the only recourse for a lot of these cases where there's real harm being done. This should have been a criminal case. Somebody should have gone to jail for what PG&E did to those people.
But that wasn't going to happen, so you got to sue them.
But that was never going to happen, so this is the recourse that you have, and it's not just important, but it's a public good. And they are very much trying to turn the public opinion against us so they can pass these laws that weaken the civil courts. So I highly recommend that movie. It's one of the few movies where you leave and you're like, my mind has changed. I see the world differently now, but it's also just a very entertaining film, too.
Okay, then last thoughts on Erin Brockovich.
Well, as crowd-pleasing popcorn movies go, this really sticks the landing without ever insulting our intelligence or pandering. Well, it panders a little, I guess. It definitely panders. But all is forgiven when you make something so entertaining that's aging pretty well, I might add.
I've never loved the movie. I think it's good, though. I used to be cheesed about Julia winning. Not so cheesed anymore. I like it more. She also has somewhat disappeared. I was getting tired of her back then, but she hasn't really acted that much since this movie because she got married and had 2 kids. At least, maybe more than 2 kids, but had twins. She doesn't really make movies that often. It's maybe one a year at the most. She's done 2 or 3 things and doing the same, I can't find love, I'm Julia Roberts who can't find a man, like she did so often back in the 90s. It made her a lot of money, but she made some real stinkers. But now when she works more often than not, I like the movie. I don't know what it is. The ones who are best known for comic roles over and over again, I like them more in serious roles. Melissa McCarthy, I don't think she's that funny. But in a serious movie, I think she's excellent.
Because comedy is harder. Comedy's the hardest thing you can do, so anybody who's good at comedy is actually probably the best actor.
But Julia Roberts in Ben is Back, I'm going to say it again. Outstanding stuff. I'm not talking about nomination necessarily, but, well, then again, we saw it as a screener, I think, from a friend of ours, because I think they were trying to make the rounds for either Lucas Hedges or her being nominated. I think she would have been probably worthy, actually, now that I think about it. I like Erin Brockovich. It's at least a 7 out of 10. I think that's what I gave it at the time because I certainly respected it. And it does have the nice, satisfying ending, which, of course, is based on reality. It's not like it's phony. She actually got, I guess, millions of dollars for all she did for Ed and for the case. So that was how we saw Erin Brockovich. Did I say Brockovich? Brockovich. We'll be back in 7 days, and we'll be staying in the year 2000 as we dig into Sofia Coppola's debut film, The Virgin Suicides. Ed Lachman shot that. And that'll wrap up June. All these movies about women. They've all been about women in leading roles. And finally, one that's directed by a woman with The Virgin Suicides. The coming attractions trivia for such. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that Kirsten Dunst, okay, spoiler, dies in Sofia Coppola's movie. It's in the title, for crying out loud. And Kirsten's been featured a lot on this channel over the years, 7 times. In how many of those motion pictures that we've covered before, Virgin Suicides, does Dunst end up dead?
All right, so for the answer to that question, check out next week's episode about the Virgin Suicides. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to favorite or subscribe. There are hundreds of episodes available for you to check out. And if you like us and you'd like to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is by leaving us a rating and a review. You can also support the podcast by going to sparkplug.coffee/HYES for freshly roasted premium coffee, and that HYES will get you a 20% discount. You can also find us on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis, and we'd love to hear from you guys. There are a few ways to reach us, starting with Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis. Ryan is at MovieFiend51. We're also on Blue Sky. You can find us as Bev Ellis Ellis and Ryan-Ellis. And our email address is haveyouveriseennpodcast@gmail.com.
The dogs are finally calm. My stomach stopped making noise.
Now that we're done.
The neighbor's not making noise, but we are hot and sweaty because it's warm in this room. So I'll end it by saying, please, Bev, say cut. You don't suck at it.